Pope Francis, who has been battling pneumonia for more than 5 weeks, will be discharged from hospital on Sunday. That's according to his medical team, who on Saturday said the 88-year-old will require a further 2 months of rest at the Vatican. Francis was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February 14th with a severe respiratory infection, which has been the most serious health crisis of his 12-year papacy. Dr. Sergio Alfieri is the head of the Pope's medical team.
The Holy Father was never intubated, and he always remained alert and oriented. The Holy Father will be discharged tomorrow, as we said before, in a stable clinical condition with a prescription to partially continue drug therapy and a convalescence and rest period at least 2 months.
He added that the pontiff no longer has pneumonia, but is also not completely healed from a complex infection. On Friday, one senior cardinal had said the Pope would need to, quote, relearn to speak, after battling a respiratory infection for so long. The Vatican said Francis would make his first public appearance in more than a month on Sunday to offer a blessing from the window of his hospital room before being discharged. The Pope had been set to meet with Britain's King Charles, as well as lead the Vatican's annual celebrations for Easter in the coming weeks. A spokesperson said on Saturday that the Vatican would decide about those appointments at a later date.
Smoke rises over southern Lebanon after an exchange of fire endangered a shaky truce. Israeli artillery and airstrikes hit South Lebanon on Saturday, after Israel said it had intercepted rockets fired from across the border. Lebanon's state news agency reported a spate of Israeli airstrikes and artillery barrages in the country's war-battered south, and several deaths. Lebanon's Hezbollah denied responsibility and said it had no link to the rocket launches. It said it remained committed to the US-brokered November ceasefire with Israel, which ended a year of conflict between the two sides. No group has claimed responsibility for the rockets. Here in Metula, people rushed to shelters after sirens sounded, but soon returned to their daily routines. Saturday's strikes were the first since Israel effectively abandoned a separate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, with Palestinian militant group Hamas an ally of Hezbollah. Both groups are backed by Israel's arch-foe, Iran. Last year's war between Israel and Hezbollah was a spillover of the Gaza conflict. It rumbled across the border for months, before escalating into a blistering Israeli offensive that wiped out Hezbollah's top commanders, many of its fighters and much of its arsenal. The Israeli military said early Saturday it had intercepted 3 rockets launched from a Lebanese district about 4 miles north of the border, which was the second cross-border launch since the truce. Israel said it was looking into who was responsible. The United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, said in a written statement on Saturday that it was alarmed by the border violence, and that a further escalation could have serious consequences for the region.
After a rigorous and thorough competition between some of America's top aerospace companies, the Air Force is going to be awarding the contract for the next generation air dominance platform to Boeing. The F-47 will be the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. An experimental version of the plane has secretly been flying for almost 5 years, and we're confident that it massively overpowers the capabilities of any other nation. There's no other nation. We know every other plane. I've seen every one of them, and it's not even close. This is a next level.
We've had the F-15, we had the F-16, the F-18, the F-22, the F-35. Now we have the F-47, which sends a very direct, clear message to our allies that we're not going anywhere, and to our enemies that we will be able to project power around the globe unimpeded for generations to come.
Russia and Ukraine accused each other on Friday of attacking a major Russian gas pumping and measuring station near Suja, despite a US proposed moratorium on strikes on energy infrastructure by either side. This video posted on social media was said to show the fire, in a part of Russia's Kursk region that Moscow's forces recaptured from Ukraine earlier this month. Reuters was able to verify the location but not the date. The Kremlin said Ukraine had blown up the facility in an act of terrorism, while Kyiv said Russian forces shelled it with artillery in a provocation and denied any involvement. Meanwhile, this was one of Russia's biggest drone attacks on the Black Sea city of Odessa. It injured 3 teenagers and sparked fires late on Thursday, and it came as the Czech president was in the Ukrainian port city for talks. Petropavl is a vocal backer of Kyiv and has led an effort to source more than 1 million artillery shells for Ukraine's war effort. The long-range drones buzzed into the city in several waves, damaging infrastructure, residential houses and commercial buildings, the Interior Ministry said. Around 25 cars had been set ablaze at a car repair shop. We couldn't do anything. We stood there and watched everything go up in flames, said its owner, Inna, who didn't give her last name. Alexander Kovalenko, a military analyst, told Reuters that Russia used new tactics for the attack, having the so-called kamikaze drones descend from a higher altitude than usual and at high speeds to make it harder for Ukraine's air defences. Ukrainian, US and Russian delegations are due to meet in Saudi Arabia separately on Monday to discuss the details of the US deal, officials have said. Moscow has rejected a more comprehensive 30-day ceasefire.
Flights to Britain's Heathrow Airport began resuming late on Friday after a fire at a nearby electrical substation knocked out its power, shutting Europe's busiest airport. The closure caused travel turmoil worldwide. Heathrow said its teams had worked tirelessly to reopen and that there would be a limited number of flights on Friday, mostly focused on relocating aircraft and bringing planes into London. CEO Thomas Wolby called the incident unprecedented.
Contingencies of certain sizes, we cannot guard ourselves against 100%. I hope people appreciate that we do not close down the airport unless we have severe safety concerns. That's why we do it, and that's what has happened today.
Police said that after an initial assessment, they were not treating the incident as suspicious, although inquiries remained ongoing. The airport had been due to handle more than 1,300 flights, flying up to 291,000 passengers. Planes were instead diverted to other airports in Britain and across Europe, while many long-haul flights returned to their point of departure. Among those waiting to return to London was Jane Davis, a teacher supervising students on a school trip to Dubai.
It's bad enough if you're with your family, but when you're responsible for 8 children and who are ready, who've had an amazing week, but are just ready to be home, you've got a heavy day in front of you.
Airline executives, electrical engineers, and passengers questioned how Britain's gateway to the world could be forced to close by one fire, however large. Heathrow said it had diesel generators and uninterruptible power supplies in place to land aircraft and evacuate passengers safely, and that those systems all operated as expected. Britain's Transport Minister Heidi Alexander said those backups, however, were not designed to power the entire airport.
It's important to remember that large airports such as Heathrow take up about as much energy as a small city, and so I've spoken to the Chief Executive of Heathrow about what has happened and any lessons that might be learned for the future.
The airline industry is now facing the prospect of a financial hit costing tens of millions of dollars, and a likely fight over who should pay. Airline experts said the last time European airports experienced disruption on such a large scale was back in 2010, when an Icelandic volcanic ash cloud grounded some 100,000 flights.
Indonesian authorities have raised the alert status to the highest level after the eruption of the Lewotobi Lucky Lucky volcano Thursday night. Ash clouds spewed more than 5 miles high, and an Australian airline cancelled some flights into Bali on Friday. The eruption of the volcano in East Nusa Tenggara province followed dozens of smaller ones since March 13th, the National Geological Agency said. The agency warned of lava floods and said there were smaller eruptions early on Friday. A disaster mitigation agency spokesperson told Reuters that at least one person was injured during evacuations. There was no immediate details on the size or logistics of the evacuations. This man said his relative mistook the hot ashes for rain and was burnt after falling on a piece of burning wood. Jetstar Qantas Airways' low-cost subsidiary canceled flights between Australia and Bali on Friday morning because of the volcanic ash. In November last year, the Lewotobi Lucky volcano erupted, pelting nearby villages with hot rocks and lava flows. At least 9 people were killed and thousands were evacuated. Indonesian authorities had said at the time that it aimed to permanently relocate the residents. It was not immediately clear how many people were affected by Thursday's eruption. Indonesia has close to 130 active volcanoes and sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of high seismic activity atop various tectonic plates.